Flights are $1,400 each, my mother said. Her voice was light, casual, like she was reading off a grocery list instead of cutting me out of my own sister's wedding. The Ashfords are covering accommodation at the resort, but airfare is on each family. And honestly, Lauren, she paused. I could hear her taking a sip of something. Probably her afternoon tea, always Earl Grey at 3 in the afternoon. Some things never changed. If you can't keep up, don't bother coming. I sat on my couch in my Brooklyn apartment, phone pressed to my ear, and said nothing. It's not about the money, she continued, as if she hadn't just made it entirely about money. It's about fit. You know how the Ashfords are. Old money, very particular. Tyler's mother has very specific expectations for how this wedding should look. The guest list, the photos, Another pause. The overall impression. The overall impression, she meant me. I was the wrong impression. Nicole has worked so hard for this sweetheart. She and Tyler have been planning for over a year, flying everyone to Bali, the resort, the ceremony on the beach at sunset. It's going to be perfect. I just don't want anything to distract from her day. I stared at the window, gray January sky, a pigeon on my fire escape looking as tired as I felt. The radiator clanked in the corner, fighting against the cold. I understand, Mom. 3 words, that's all I gave her. 3 words I'd been giving her my entire life. Oh, good. The relief in her voice was almost funny. She'd expected me to fight, to cry, to beg. She'd probably rehearsed responses for all of those. But acceptance, that threw her off balance for exactly half a second before she recovered. I knew you'd understand. You've always been the reasonable one, Lauren, not like your sister with all her dramatics. Nicole had a meltdown last week because the orchids might be slightly more pink than coral. Can you imagine? I could imagine. I could imagine it very well, actually. She laughed. I didn't. The wedding is January 25th. We fly out on the 22nd. There's a welcome dinner that night, then activities all week. I'll send photos, of course. And maybe we can do a little celebration when we get back. Just the family. We could go to that Italian place you like. Just the family, without me there. And then a consolation dinner at a restaurant I hadn't been to in 3 years. That sounds nice, I said. Perfect. I have to run. Hair appointment at 4. We're doing a trial run for the wedding look. Can you believe my stylist wanted to charge me $200 just for a consultation? She laughed again. Anyway, love you, sweetheart. Love you too, Mom. The line went dead. I sat there for a long time, phone still in my hand, letting the silence settle around me like dust. Outside, the pigeon flew away. The radiator clanked again. Someone in the apartment above me turned on music. Life continued. $1,400. That's what I was worth to my mother. That's the price tag she'd put on my presents at my own sister's wedding. Too expensive. Not worth the investment. The thing is, I could have afforded the flight. I could have afforded 10 flights first class with champagne and those little warm towels they give you. My salary at Celestine was more than my mother made in her best year as a real estate agent. But she didn't know that. She still thought I was the struggling artist she'd labeled me 10 years ago when I dropped out of my finance major to study design. In her mind, I was frozen at 21 making bad choices and probably waiting tables somewhere. She had no idea who I'd become. And I had stopped trying to tell her. Monday morning, I walked into the Celestine Events office on Madison Avenue with 2 coffees and a headache that wouldn't quit. The office was chaos in the best way. Phones ringing, designers rushing between mood boards, the smell of fresh flowers from the sample arrangements in the corner. Wedding season never really ended in our world. There was always a couple somewhere desperate to make their dreams come true, and we were the ones who made it happen. You look like death, Hannah Chen said, intercepting me at my desk. She grabbed one of the coffees without asking. That was our deal. Thanks. Also, seriously, what happened to you? You've got that look. What look? The look you get when you've been talking to your family. I dropped into my chair and pulled up my email. 347 unread messages since Friday. Par for the course. My mom called Saturday. Hannah wheeled her chair over, abandoning whatever she'd been working on. She was my best friend in the office, the only one who knew the full picture of my family situation. We'd started at Celestine the same year, worked our way up together, survived 3 bridezillas, 2 groom meltdowns, and 1 actual fistfight at a rehearsal dinner. Nothing brought people together like shared trauma. What did Susan do this time? She told me not to come to Nicole's wedding. Hannah's coffee cup stopped halfway to her mouth. What, your sister's wedding? The Bali one. The Bali one. The wedding you've been designing for 6 months. That's the one. The wedding where you personally flew to Bali twice to scout venues. Hannah, The wedding where you spent 3 weeks finding orchids in the exact shade of coral Nicole wanted. I get it. She put down her coffee and spun her chair to face me fully. Her expression was somewhere between outraged and fascinated, like she was watching a car crash in slow motion. Lauren, does she know? Does any of them know? I laughed. It came out bitter, scraping against my throat. She thinks I work in events, quote unquote. Pretty sure she pictures me blowing up balloons at children's birthday parties. Or maybe folding napkins at a catering company, something appropriately unsuccessful. I gestured at my screen where the Crawford-Ashford wedding file was open. Floor plans for the beachfront venue, seating charts for 230 guests. Vendor contracts worth more than my mother's house. They're paying Celestine $200,000 for this wedding, I said. $200,000. They hired us because Tyler's cousin used us for her wedding last year. The Ashfords recommended us specifically, said we were the best on the East Coast, and not once in 6 months did it occur to any of them that their event coordinator might be related to the bride. Did you not tell them when they hired us? I pulled up my portfolio folder. Every email chain, every contract, every late-night revision when Nicole changed her mind about centerpieces for the 14th time. 6 months of work, invisible to the people it was for. My name isn't on any of the client-facing documents. Company policy. All communication goes through Marcus. Our boss, the face of Celestine. I'm just the designer who makes it happen, the wizard behind the curtain, and my family has no idea what that means. Hannah was quiet for a moment, processing. That's actually insane, Lauren. You're one of the best designers in the city. You've done weddings for senators. That tech billionaire last spring, you won an award. There was an article in the Times. My mother asked me last Thanksgiving if I was still doing my little party thing. I clicked through to the backup vendor list I'd spent weeks assembling, 3 alternates for every major supplier, contingencies for weather illness cancellations. She also asked if I had any nice single friends I could set Nicole up with. Nicole, who was already engaged to Tyler at the time. She just didn't think to mention that to me. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Everything was in this file. Every backup plan, every emergency contact, every contingency for monsoon weather or food poisoning or cold feet. I knew this wedding better than Nicole did. Better than my mother did. Better than anyone. And in 4 days I would watch from 5,000 miles away while strangers executed my vision for my sister's big day. This is really messed up, Hannah said quietly. Yeah, I closed the file. It really is. I didn't used to be invisible. There was a time when I thought I could make my family see me, really see me, not as the difficult daughter who didn't follow the plan, but as someone who had found her own path and was actually good at it. I was 28 when I got the job at Celestine. I'd spent 6 years after college working my way up through smaller firms, building a portfolio, learning everything I could about design and logistics, and the delicate art of making rich people's dreams come true. I started as an assistant making copies and picking up dry cleaning. By the time Celestine called me in for an interview, I'd designed 47 events and had a reputation for solving impossible problems. When they offered me the position, I beat out over 200 applicants. It was the proudest moment of my life. I called my parents that night. So you're giving up your art for party planning, my mother said. I stood in my tiny studio apartment, the acceptance letter still warm from the printer, and felt something crack inside my chest. It's not party planning, Mom. Celestine is one of the top event design firms in the country. We do weddings, corporate events, galas. The Met Gala last year, we did the after party. This is a real career, a serious career. I'm sure it's very nice, honey. Her voice was the same one she used when I was 12 and showed her my drawings. Polite, patient, waiting for me to grow out of it. I just don't want you to have unrealistic expectations. Not everyone can have what Nicole has. Nicole, who was 24 at the time, already engaged to Tyler Ashford. Nicole, who had never worked a day in her life because she'd never had to. Nicole, who was doing everything right because she'd followed the script our mother had written for her since birth. Dad, I tried. What do you think? Silence on the other end. I could picture him in his recliner, newspaper in hand, half watching whatever game was on, waiting for someone to tell him what to say. I think your mother makes a good point, kiddo. That was Dad. Classic David Crawford. He hadn't had an original opinion since the Reagan administration. Whatever Susan Crawford said became the truth in our house. Always had. Okay, I said. I have to go. I stopped sharing after that. Stopped calling with updates. Stopped sending photos of the events I'd designed, the clients who'd cried happy tears because I'd made their visions come true. My family saw what they wanted to see, and no amount of evidence would change their minds. I became a ghost. Present at holidays, silent about my life, nodding along when my mother talked about Nicole's wonderful accomplishments and Tyler's wonderful family and how wonderful everything was going to be. It was easier that way. Easier to be invisible than to be constantly found lacking. Thursday morning started like any other day. I was at my desk by 8 reviewing the final details for the Crawford-Ashford wedding, final vendor confirmations, transportation logistics for guests arriving from 3 different airports, the custom orchid arrangements that had taken 2 months to source. Everything was in place. Everything was perfect. By 8:30, everything had fallen apart. Emergency meeting, now. Marcus Chen, our boss, and no relation to Hannah, appeared in the doorway of the main workspace. His face was gray, the color of old concrete. I'd worked with him for 3 years and never seen him look like that. Conference room, everyone. We filed in, 12 designers, 4 coordinators, 2 assistants. The room felt too small for all of us. Something was very wrong. I'm going to be direct, Marcus said, standing at the head of the table. Prestige Events Bali, our partner agency for all Indonesian operations, has declared bankruptcy. As of 6 a.m. this morning, their owner has left the country. Their staff has been let go without notice. Their accounts have been frozen. The room went silent. Someone dropped a pen. It sounded like a gunshot. All 5 of our Bali weddings this month are affected. The good news is our contracts are with the venues and vendors directly, not through Prestige. The bad news is Prestige was handling all on-ground logistics, payments, setup, coordination, day of management. Without them, we have no local presence. Someone behind me whispered a curse. I think it was Hannah. What about the Crawford-Ashford wedding? I asked. My voice sounded strange, far away. That's Saturday. Marcus looked at me. He knew it was mine, knew I'd poured 6 months into it, knew it was the biggest wedding of our winter season. The venue called this morning. Prestige was supposed to wire the final payment yesterday. It never arrived. They're threatening to cancel our reservation if we can't confirm funds by tomorrow. My stomach dropped through the floor. The caterer hasn't received their deposit confirmation. The florist is asking questions about their payment timeline. Everything was routed through Prestige's accounts and now, he spread his hands. Now we have a major crisis. The room erupted, everyone talking at once. Wedding dates, vendor relationships, refund policies, liability concerns. My head was spinning. I can fix this, I heard myself say. The room quieted. The Crawford wedding, I know every vendor personally. I have direct contacts for everyone. If someone can fly to Bali tonight and manage things on the ground, that's exactly what I was going to propose, Marcus said. We need boots on the ground, someone who knows these weddings inside and out. He looked at me. The question was obvious. I opened my mouth to volunteer, then closed it. My family didn't want me there. I'll think about it, I said. Give me an hour. I walked back to my desk on autopilot, pulled out my phone. 2 texts from Nicole, sent 30 minutes ago. MG, Lauren, have you heard? The wedding is falling apart. Mom is freaking out. And then 5 minutes later, Mom says she'll figure it out. She always does. I stared at those words until they blurred. Mom will figure it out. I almost laughed right there in the middle of the office. My mother had no idea that the only person who could figure it out was the daughter she'd told not to come. That night, I sat in my apartment with the wedding portfolio spread across my coffee table. Every contract, every backup vendor, every contingency plan I'd built over 6 months of meticulous work. The portfolio was thick, heavy with paper and possibility. I could fix this. I knew I could. Marcus had asked again before I left, more urgent this time. Someone needed to fly to Bali. Tonight. The venue needed confirmation by morning. The caterer needed assurance. Everything was unraveling, and I had the needle and thread to stitch it back together. Part of me wanted to let it burn, let them scramble, let them see what happened when they dismissed the one person who actually knew what she was doing. But then I thought of Nicole. Nicole, who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms when we were kids because she was scared of the thunder, but too proud to tell Mom. Nicole, who cried at my college graduation, even though I knew Mom had told her not to make a scene. Nicole, who texted me last month to ask if the wedding colors looked right, not knowing she was asking the person who'd chosen them in the first place. She was still my sister, even if she'd become a smaller, shinier version of our mother, even if she'd learned to look through me the way everyone else did. I didn't want to ruin her wedding. I just wanted to be seen. My phone rang. I looked at the screen. The name there made my heart stop. Mom. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail. Let her figure it out herself. Let her hire some stranger who didn't know the difference between the primary orchid supplier and the backup, who didn't know that Nicole was allergic to lilies, who didn't know that the father of the groom hated the color yellow because it reminded him of his ex-wife. The phone kept ringing. Once, twice, 3 times, I answered. Lauren. Her voice was different, shaking. All the casual cruelty from 3 days ago had evaporated, replaced by something raw and unfamiliar, something desperate. Lauren, the wedding is falling apart. I said nothing, let her fill the silence. The venue is threatening to cancel. The caterer, the florist, something about an agency going bankrupt in Indonesia. Nicole has been crying for hours. Tyler's mother is talking about postponing the whole thing. Postponing Lauren. Do you know what that would do to us? The Ashfords have been planning this for over a year. All their friends are flying in from Europe. Their family has owned that company for 4 generations. If we can't deliver what we promised... She trailed off. I could hear her breathing through the phone, ragged, panicked. The sound of a woman whose carefully constructed world was crumbling. I know you work in events, she continued, grasping. Some kind of coordination thing, party planning or whatever. Do you know anyone who can help? Anyone at all? Money isn't an object at this point. We'll pay whatever it takes. Tyler's family will pay whatever it takes. Money isn't an object. 3 days ago, $1,400 was too much to spend on having me present. Now money wasn't an object. I looked at the portfolio on my coffee table. Every detail, every solution, every piece of a puzzle only I knew how to assemble. Mom, I said slowly, I don't know anyone who can help. Silence. I could feel her disappointment through the phone. Of course Lauren wouldn't know anyone useful. Of course the failure daughter couldn't deliver when it mattered. Some things never changed. I don't know anyone who can help, I repeated, because I am the help. What? Her voice cracked on the word. I designed Nicole's wedding, every single detail. The venue, the flowers, the seating chart for 230 guests, the menu, the backup generators for tropical storms, the transportation schedule for every single person flying into Bali. All of it. Me. I work for Celestine Events, Mom, the agency you hired. I'm their lead designer. I've been working on this wedding for 6 months. Nothing. Just her breath on the other end, shallow, disbelieving. I could picture her face, the confusion, the slow dawn of understanding. I know every vendor by name. I know the manager of the resort because I've had dinner with him twice. I know exactly what went wrong today, and I know exactly how to fix it. I've already built contingency plans for situations exactly like this. I stood up, walked to the window. The city sparkled below me, indifferent and beautiful. Somewhere out there, people were living their lives unaware that mine was finally changing. And 3 days ago, when you told me not to bother coming, when you said I couldn't keep up, when you said I would be a distraction from Nicole's perfect day, I smiled. For the first time in years, I actually smiled while talking to my mother. You said that to the only person on earth who can save this wedding. The silence stretched. Somewhere on the other end, I heard my father's voice asking what was happening. My mother shushing him with a sharp hiss. When she finally spoke, her voice was small. Smaller than I'd ever heard it. Smaller than I knew it could be. Lauren, I don't understand. How is this possible? Why didn't you tell us? No, I said. You never understood, and you never asked. I hung up before she could respond. Then I opened my laptop and booked a flight to Bali. The silence on the other end of the phone stretched for what felt like hours. I could hear my mother breathing, processing, recalculating everything she thought she knew about her eldest daughter. In the background, I heard my father asking what was happening and my mother shushing him with a sharp hiss. When she finally spoke, her voice was different, smaller. The confident, dismissive Susan Crawford I'd known my entire life had vanished, replaced by something I barely recognized. Lauren, I didn't know. How could I possibly have known? You never told us. You never asked. I kept my voice steady, calm, the way I spoke to difficult vendors and panicking brides. You assumed. You've been assuming for 10 years. But why didn't you say something when we hired the agency? When we were planning, you could have what told you your party planner daughter actually knew what she was doing. Would you have listened? Silence. We both knew the answer. Lauren, please. Her voice cracked on the word. I'd never heard my mother beg for anything in my life. Nicole's wedding, Tyler's family. If this falls apart, we'll be humiliated. I'll help. The words came out before I could stop them. Not for her. Not for the woman who'd spent 3 decades making me feel like I wasn't enough. But for Nicole. For the little sister who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. For the girl who'd cried at my graduation even when she wasn't supposed to. You will, hope flooded her voice. Oh, Lauren, thank you. Thank you so much. I knew you'd understand. I have conditions. She stopped mid-sentence. I'm in charge, completely. No interference from you, no second guessing, no opinions about how things should be done. You hired Celestine Events to plan this wedding, and I'm the lead designer. That means my decisions are final. Of course, whatever you need. And when this is over, you and I are going to have a conversation, a real one. And you're going to listen, actually listen, for the first time in my life. Another pause, then quietly, okay. I'll be on the first flight out. Tell Nicole everything is going to be fine. I hung up before she could respond. Then I opened my laptop and started making calls. The flight to Bali was 17 hours, but I didn't sleep. I spent the entire time on my phone and laptop rerouting vendors, confirming backups, restructuring timelines. By the time we landed in Denpasar, I had a new plan, not as elegant as the original, but workable, survivable. The resort manager Wayan was waiting for me in the lobby. We'd worked together twice before on destination weddings, and his face flooded with relief when he saw me. Miss Lauren, he clasped my hands in both of his. We are so grateful. When the agency collapsed, when we heard the payments were frozen, we feared the worst. But when your office called to say you were coming personally, I have contingencies. I pulled out my portfolio, the one I'd been building for 6 months. Every backup vendor, every alternative plan, every phone number of every contact I'd made in Bali over the past 3 years. Let's start with the venue payment. I have authorization to wire directly from Celestine's accounts. The money will clear by noon. Wayan nodded, his professional calm returning. The caterer, I called them from the plane. They're confirmed. I'll need to meet with them this afternoon to adjust the timeline. And the flowers, the orchids from Singapore. Being rerouted through a different customs broker. They should arrive tomorrow morning. I checked my tablet. If they don't, I have a local supplier on standby. Different variety, but equally beautiful. For the next 3 hours I worked, made calls, sent emails, solved problems. This was what I did. This was who I was. The chaos that had seemed insurmountable from New York melted away under the systematic approach I'd spent years perfecting. I was reviewing the updated seating chart when I heard familiar voices in the lobby. I looked up. My mother stood near the reception desk, my father beside her, both of them looking lost and out of place. And behind them, Nicole, her face blotchy from crying, Tyler's arm around her shoulders. They hadn't seen me yet. For a moment, I considered slipping away, continuing my work from behind the scenes, invisible the way I'd always been. But something had shifted. Something I couldn't quite name. I stood up. Nicole saw me first. Her eyes went wide. Lauren, my mother turned. The expression on her face was something I'd never seen before. Confusion, uncertainty, like she was looking at a stranger. I was surrounded by staff tablets and documents. I was giving orders and people were following them. I was in my element, and for the first time in my life, my family was witnessing it. Susan opened her mouth to speak. I held up one finger. Not now. She closed her mouth. I turned back to Wayan. The florist delivery. Let's confirm that timeline. And behind me, I could feel my mother's eyes on my back. Could feel her confusion, her shock, her slow dawning realization that the daughter she'd dismissed for 31 years was the one holding everything together. Good. Let her watch. The rehearsal dinner went off without a hitch. I'd redesigned the layout that morning, adjusted the lighting to compensate for a broken fixture, and convinced the chef to modify the menu when we discovered one of the Ashford cousins had developed a severe shellfish allergy. By the time the guests arrived, everything was perfect, seamless, as if no crisis had ever happened. I stood at the edge of the terrace, watching the festivities from a distance. This was my favorite part of the job. Seeing the vision come together, seeing people happy, seeing all the pieces click into place, like a complicated puzzle finally solved. Lauren, I turned. Nicole stood behind me, still in her rehearsal dress, a glass of champagne in her hand. She looked beautiful. She always looked beautiful. But tonight there was something else in her eyes. Something uncertain. Hey. I kept my voice neutral, professional, the way I'd trained myself to be around my family. Can we talk? I nodded toward the empty corner of the terrace away from the other guests. Nicole followed me, her heels clicking against the stone. When we stopped, she didn't say anything for a long moment, just looked at me, really looked like she was seeing me for the first time. Mom told me, she finally said, about your job, about Celestine, about all of this. She gestured at the decorated venue, the lights, the flowers. You did this, all of it, yes. For 6 months, yes. And you never said anything. I leaned against the terrace railing, looking out at the ocean. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It was going to be even more beautiful tomorrow. Nicole's wedding day. I tried once, I said. Remember when I got the job at Celestine, I called Mom that night. She asked if I was giving up my art for party planning. Nicole's face fell. I remember. After that, I stopped trying. It was easier to just be whoever you all expected me to be. The struggling artist, the one who couldn't keep up, I shrugged. Eventually, I stopped thinking about what you knew and focused on what I was building. Lauren, Nicole's voice broke. I'm sorry, I should have asked. I should have paid attention. I was so wrapped up in my own life and Tyler in the wedding, I never even thought to wonder what you were actually doing. I didn't say anything. There wasn't anything to say. She was right. All those times I talked about the wedding plans, about the designers, about how incredible everything was going to be, you were the one making it happen, and I had no idea. She laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. You must have thought I was an idiot. I thought you were my sister. I turned to face her. I wanted to give you something beautiful, even if you never knew it was me. Nicole's eyes filled with tears. Real ones, not the pretty photogenic kind she'd learned from our mother. I know now, she whispered. She hugged me then, tight and desperate the way she used to when we were kids and she was scared of the dark. I felt something crack open in my chest, something I'd kept locked away for a very long time. Tomorrow is your day, I said into her hair. Let me give you the wedding you deserve. She pulled back, wiping her eyes. Thank you, Lauren, for everything. I smiled, a real smile. That's what big sisters are for. The call came at 6 a.m. I was already awake, already dressed, already reviewing the day's timeline, when my phone buzzed with Wayan's number. Miss Lauren, his voice was tense. We have a problem, the orchid shipment. It's been held at customs, some paperwork issue with the new broker. They're saying it won't clear until Monday. My stomach dropped. The orchids were everything. Nicole had spent 3 weeks choosing the exact shade of coral. I'd sourced them from Singapore, arranged special temperature-controlled transport, planned the entire ceremony aesthetic around them. Without the orchids, the vision collapsed. What about the backup? My voice came out steadier than I felt. The local supplier. I called them first. Their stock was bought out by another event last week. They have nothing in that color. I sat down on the edge of my bed. The room felt too small suddenly, too quiet. The panic I'd been holding back for 2 days started to rise in my throat. What if I couldn't fix this? What if my mother was right all along? What if I was just playing pretend, fooling myself into thinking I could handle things that were too big for someone like me? The thoughts spiraled. I could feel myself slipping into that familiar darkness, the place I went when I was 10, and my mother forgot to pick me up from school when I was 16, and she compared my art project to Nicole's perfect grades when I was 21, and she dismissed my dreams with a single sentence. For 5 minutes, I let myself break. I sat in silence, letting the fear wash over me, letting myself feel all the things I usually buried under professionalism and competence, and the careful mask I'd built to survive my family. Then I opened my portfolio. Backup florist number 2, a local Balinese grower I'd met on my second scouting trip. She specialized in native orchids, different varieties than what I'd planned, different colors, but equally beautiful and available on short notice. I made the call. By 7:30, I had a new plan. Native Balinese orchids in shades of sunset orange and deep pink. Not what Nicole had originally wanted, but something better. Something that belonged to this island, this moment, this wedding. I wasn't the daughter my mother saw. I wasn't the failure they assumed. I was Lauren Davis, and I had never lost a wedding yet. I wasn't about to start with my sisters. The ceremony was beautiful, not the beauty I'd originally planned. Something different, something unexpected. The native orchids cascaded down the ceremony arch in waves of color, catching the golden light of the Balinese sunset. The local florist had woven in tropical greenery and tiny white blossoms that sparkled like stars. It was better than the original design, more alive, more real. I watched from the side, hidden behind a pillar, as Nicole walked down the aisle. She was radiant in her white dress, tears already streaming down her face as she saw Tyler waiting for her at the altar. My father walked beside her, his arm linked through hers, his face a mask of proud emotion. My mother sat in the front row, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. None of them looked for me. They didn't need to. The wedding was happening. That was all that mattered. I checked my earpiece. Caterer status. Ready when you are. Miss Lauren, appetizers will deploy immediately after the ceremony. Lighting team, standing by for the first dance sequence. Music, cued and ready. Everything was in place. Everything was perfect. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Dearly beloved, the officiant began. We are gathered here today. I'd heard these words hundreds of times. at hundreds of weddings, but watching my sister say them, watching her promise forever to a man she loved, something shifted inside me. This was why I did this job. Not for the money or the recognition or the fancy venues, for this moment, for the look on someone's face when their dreams became reality, even if that someone had never seen me. I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride. The crowd erupted in applause. Nicole and Tyler kissed, laughed, cried. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in impossible colors. I allowed myself a small smile. Then I went back to work. The reception was in full swing when Margaret Ashford found me. Tyler's mother was an elegant woman in her 60s, the kind of understated wealth that didn't need to announce itself. She'd barely spoken to me during the planning process, leaving the details to Tyler and Nicole. But now she approached me directly, her champagne glass catching the string lights. "You're Lauren, aren't you?" Her voice was crisp. "New England, old money. The designer, and yes, ma'am. The one who saved all this." I nodded, unsure where this was going. Margaret studied me for a moment. Then she smiled, a genuine smile, not the polished social version I'd expected. "My son told me what happened. The agency collapsed, the chaos. He said you flew in overnight and fixed everything in less than 48 hours. It's my job. It's more than that." She gestured at the reception, the fairy lights, the flower arrangements, the guests laughing and dancing. "This isn't just competence. This is artistry. I've attended hundreds of events in my life, and very few have felt like this." She reached into her clutch and pulled out a business card. "The Ashford Foundation is hosting our annual gala in March. Our usual planner is retiring. I'd like you to consider taking over." I took the card, staring at the embossed letters. The Ashford Foundation Gala, one of the most prestigious events on the East Coast, a career-defining opportunity. "I'll have my office send the details Monday," Margaret continued. "But I wanted you to know personally. What you've done here, it hasn't gone unnoticed." She touched my arm briefly, then disappeared back into the crowd. I stood there holding the card, trying to process what had just happened. That's when I heard Nicole's voice through the reception speakers. "Excuse me, everyone. I know Tyler already gave his speech, but I wanted to add something." I looked up. Nicole was standing at the microphone, her new husband beside her, her champagne glass raised. "Most of you know that we had some issues with our wedding planning this week." Polite laughter from the guests who'd heard the rumors. "What you might not know is who saved us." My stomach tightened. "I want to introduce someone very special. Someone who flew 17 hours to get here. Someone who worked around the clock to make this day happen. Someone who, it turns out, designed this entire wedding from the very beginning." Nicole's eyes found me in the crowd. "My sister Lauren." A murmur went through the guests. Heads turned. I felt 200 pairs of eyes land on me. "Lauren works for Celestine Events," Nicole continued. "She's one of their top designers. She's planned weddings for senators and CEOs. She won an award last year. And for 6 months she's been planning my wedding. Designing every detail, choosing every flower." Nicole's voice caught. "And until 3 days ago, I had no idea." The murmur grew louder. I could see people connecting the dots. The bride's sister, the designer, the same person. "I spent years not seeing my sister." Nicole's eyes were wet. "We all did. We saw what we expected to see instead of what was actually there. And I'm sorry, Lauren. I'm so sorry it took a crisis to make me realize how incredible you are." Nicole raised her glass. "To Lauren, my sister, my wedding planner, the person who saved the most important day of my life." "To Lauren," the crowd echoed. 230 people applauded, but I wasn't looking at them. I was looking at my mother. Susan Crawford sat at the head table, her champagne glass frozen halfway to her lips. She wasn't clapping. She was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen on her face before. Recognition, real recognition. Not the dismissive acknowledgement she'd given my accomplishments before. Not the polite disinterest she'd mastered over 3 decades. She was seeing me, actually seeing me, maybe for the first time ever, and she was crying. Not the elegant, controlled tears she produced at appropriate moments. Ugly tears. The kind that came when you realized you'd been wrong about something fundamental. Wrong for a very, very long time. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I didn't feel the triumph I'd expected to feel. I just nodded, and for the first time in my life, my mother nodded back. The party went late into the night. I stayed until the last guest left, until the caterers began breaking down the tables, until the string lights were switched off one by one. This was my job. This was who I was. You didn't leave until the work was done. But when the cleanup was finally in motion, when there was nothing left for me to do, I slipped away to the beach. The sand was cool beneath my bare feet. I'd taken off my heels hours ago, tucked them under a table, and forgotten about them. The waves rolled in gentle and rhythmic silver under the moonlight. I stood at the edge of the water, letting it wash over my toes. Lauren. I didn't turn around. I knew that voice. My mother appeared beside me, her own shoes dangling from her hand. Her makeup was smudged. Her hair had come loose from its careful arrangement. She looked smaller somehow, more human. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly. I nodded. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. We just stood there, two women who'd spent 31 years not understanding each other, watching the waves in silence. "I didn't know," Susan finally said. Her voice was different than I'd ever heard it. Stripped of the confidence, the judgment, the certainty that she was always right. I should have paid attention. I should have asked questions instead of making assumptions. But I didn't. "No," I agreed. "You didn't. When you called about the Celestine job, I thought." She trailed off, shook her head. "I don't know what I thought. That it was another one of your phases. That you'd give it up in a year and move on to something else. I never imagined. That I'd be good at it," she flinched. "That you'd be brilliant at it. That you'd build something real while I wasn't watching." The waves lapped at our feet. Somewhere behind us, the cleanup crew was loading equipment into trucks. The wedding was over. A new marriage had begun. "I was jealous," my mother said. I turned to look at her. "What? Of you? I've been jealous of you for years." She laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "You built something on your own, Lauren. Something real. Something that had nothing to do with who you married or what family you came from. Nicole married into success. I married into it. But you—" She shook her head. "You actually earned it, by yourself, and I didn't know how to handle that. I'd spent my whole life wanting my mother to see me, to acknowledge me, to be proud of me. Now here it was finally, and I didn't know what to feel. I don't need your approval anymore, Mom." The words came out gentler than I expected. Not angry, just true. "I stopped needing it a long time ago. I had to survive." Susan nodded. "I know, that's what scares me. I spent so long thinking you needed me to guide you, to tell you what was realistic, to protect you from disappointment. And the whole time you were building a life without me." "I was building a life without your doubt," I corrected. "There's a difference." We stood in silence again. The moon had risen higher, painting a silver path across the water. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," Susan said finally. "I don't think I've earned that. But I'd like to know you, Lauren. The real you. The one I missed while I was busy seeing what I expected to see." I thought about all the years of dismissal. The phone calls where she never asked about my work. The holidays where I smiled and nodded while she praised Nicole's accomplishments. The constant crushing weight of being invisible in my own family. I thought about letting it all go. "That's going to take time," I said. "I know. And it's going to require you to actually listen, to ask questions instead of making assumptions, to believe me when I tell you who I am." "I know." I looked at my mother, really looked at her. She was 56 years old, standing barefoot on a beach in Bali. Her perfect facade crumbled away. She looked tired. She looked scared. She looked like someone who'd just realized she'd wasted 30 years on the wrong priorities. "Okay," I said. "We can try." She reached out and squeezed my hand, just for a moment. Then she turned and walked back toward the resort, her silhouette growing smaller until it disappeared into the darkness. I stayed on the beach. The water was warm around my ankles, the sand soft between my toes. I didn't need their approval anymore. I never did. I'd built a career, a reputation, a life that had nothing to do with whether Susan Crawford believed in me. But hearing Nicole say my name in front of 200 people, seeing my mother finally understand, finally see what had been in front of her all along, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like freedom. I walked along the shoreline, heels dangling from my fingers, warm water washing over my feet. Behind me, the last of the reception lights flickered off. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear my sister's laughter, bright and happy, the sound of a woman starting her new life. Tomorrow, I would fly back to New York. Back to my apartment, my office, my work. The Ashford Foundation Gala would probably land on my desk by Monday. More weddings, more galas, more dreams to build for people I'd never meet. But tonight, I was just Lauren. Not the failure, not the invisible one, not the daughter who couldn't keep up. Just Lauren. And for the first time in 31 years, that was enough.